in Capernaum. He's been in all these different places, as we have seen so far. We'll recap some of that next week, what places Jesus had been up to this point. Tonight, there's a pivotal moment that we're going to see. There are a couple pivotal scriptures you're going to see tonight, and a couple of teachings where Jesus kind of rehashes some stuff that he had said before, which is it's kind of that ever-present reminder of don't forget what I told you before. All right? And so we're going to see that tonight. And so let's look at Mark 10, verse number 32. It says, they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. They were astonished, but those who followed him were afraid. Taking the 12 aside, he began to tell them the things that would happen to him. Listen, we are going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they'll condemn him to death. Then they will hand him over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him, and he will rise after 3 days. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, approached him and said, Teacher, we want you to do something for us if we ask you. What do you want me to do for you? He asked them. They answered, allow us to sit at your right hand, at your left hand in your glory. Jesus said to them, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup I drink, or to be baptized with baptism I am baptized with? We're able, he told them. They told him. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink, and you will be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not mine to give. Instead, it is for those it has been prepared for. When the other 10 disciples heard this, they began to be indignant. That means frustrated heavily. They were indignant with James and John. Jesus called them over and said to them, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles dominate them, and their men of high positions exercise power over them. But it must not be like that among you. On the contrary, whoever wants to become great must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be a slave to all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, to give his life a ransom for many. Mark 10:45 is one of those verses that should be stapled in our minds. You should memorize that verse. And the reason being is because that is Jesus summarizing his mission, but putting it in the context of human action and human activity. Instead of just saying, you need to serve people. He said, you need to do it just as the Son of Man did. He's given them a depiction or an example of what that servanthood means. Okay? Then they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a large crowd, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he began to cry out, Son of David, Jesus, have mercy on me. Many people told him to keep quiet, but he was crying out all the more, have mercy on me, Son of David. Jesus stopped and said, call him. So they called the blind man and said to him, have courage, get up. He's calling for you. He threw off his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. Jesus answered him, what do you want me to do for you? Rabboni. The blind man told him, I want to see. Go your way. Jesus told him, your faith has healed you. Immediately he could see and began to follow him on the road. All right, so that's where we're going to have to end, because we do get to Palm Sunday next week, okay? So that's where we're cutting off for tonight. And we're going to get to our questions. And this is, like I said, this is, you're starting to get to every bit of Mark is enjoyable. It's a great gospel to study. But now you're getting to the big part of it. And it's kind of cool that God has great timing and he's doing this with us right at Easter. We didn't make this up. We didn't plan this way. But God's laying it out that this is coming up for us in our study right at Easter. So what do we call the beginning of this passage? It's called the turn. The turn. All right. If you look, I will give you, if you'll give me just a second, let me give you the direct. That's pretty cool. Lord, help me turn right to it. You can, and that couldn't have happened again. Yeah, I'm telling you, God is good. All right, put out beside of that Luke 9:51, because in Luke's Gospel is chapter 9 where this would take place, and in Mark's Gospel is obviously chapter 10. And what it says in Luke's Gospel in the Holman, which I don't really like. On this, I love the Holman on most everything, but I don't really like it on this. It says he determined to journey to Jerusalem. I believe it's the New King James on this. It says he set his face to go to Jerusalem. I love that translation of it, that he set his face. It was a determination. This is the turn. All right, we talked about a few minutes ago. He had been all over the place prior to. But when it's telling us in this passage that he determined to go to Jerusalem, he was going to die. Now you imagine the weight of those steps for just a moment, as every step was indeed closer to the cross. From this point forward, everything is one step closer to the cross. Can you imagine as Jerusalem loomed on the horizon what that must have felt like? There was no turning back. So this is what we call the turn. That in the ministry we get to the point where the cross is coming. You remember how we talked about earlier in Mark, he kept saying, my hour has not yet come, my time has not yet come. You're not going to see that anymore because the time had come. And so when we're reading in here, it says they were on the road going to Jerusalem. Jesus was walking ahead of him. Mark's not as definitive on it, but Jesus is when you look at what he says in 33 through 34. He gives them graphic details about what's about to happen to him now. He's already told them before that he's going to die. They rejected that. They didn't like it. They even tried to rebuke him for it. Jesus goes into detail and he is telling them, look, this is what's coming. And so this is what we call the turn. Where are they headed? Jerusalem. All right. There's no doubt. Scripture's clear on where they're going. We know that that's where everything was going down. And you can answer that next question. What's going to take place in Jerusalem? All of it. He's going to be crucified. He's going to be flogged. He's going to be mocked. He's going to get the crown of thorns. You don't have to go into that if you don't want to. You can just say crucifixion and everything leading up to. But one of the things you don't want to do, guys, is forget what all happened to him during that time. And we're going to get into very deep, discussion on that when we get there. Because every bit of that was symbolic. Every bit of it was symbolic. The crown of thorns had a reason, had a purpose. There was symbolism to it. The robe they threw over him, mocking him and spitting on him and beating him with reeds, and all the things that they did to Jesus was very symbolic. And so we'll get into those. But what would take place there? Make sure you can, on your question, you can put whatever you want to. Arrested, tried, crucified. But make sure in your mind you're thinking everything went down there, because it did. What emotions did those traveling with Jesus have at this time? Afraid and astonished. Yeah. Astonished at what he had done, but also afraid that someone could hold that kind of power. It's where we get those questions that we've seen in Mark so far. Who is this man that even the wind and the seas obey? Who is this man who can do these things? There is that astonishment, but it's also a wow, whose presence are we in? So astonished and afraid. Verses 33 and 34 are what? The third prediction of his death. Third time in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus predicted his death or prophesied. I don't really care for the word predicted, even though I just used it, because predicted leaves a little too vagueness. Prophesy is a better word. just because prophesying gives us this understanding that God had already revealed. Does that make sense? God had revealed to Jesus this was what was to come. To predict is like me saying Virginia's going to win the national championship. And then if they win, oh, the prediction was right. Okay, but there was a chance they wouldn't, right? When Jesus said these things were going to happen, there was no chance that it wasn't going to happen. It was going to happen, okay? That's why I say we like to use prophesy a little bit better than we do predicted, because prediction leaves room for error, right? Yeah. There's always that possibility that it could go awry. Like when people predict who's going to, like the weatherman, when they predict the weather. It can snow in April. So we don't want to use predicted too much. What is to be taken from these scriptures that applies to us today? Jesus prepares us beforehand. He is going to Jerusalem. He knows what is coming. And what is he doing? He's getting them ready for what they can't even imagine is going to happen, even though he's told them. And notice what he does with this one. He goes into more detail in this one than he ever has before. The other times that he's talked about his death, it wasn't vague, because he said that he'd be offered up in the hands of sinful men and he'd come back on the third day. But look at how he does it with this one. He says they will condemn him to death. They'll hand him over to the Gentiles, which would be who? Who's the Gentiles he's referring to? Yes, the Rome. Yeah, the Romans. Pilate and the Roman leaders. So let's know that when we're looking at that. What does it mean that they're going to hand him over to the Gentiles? Remember, he's turned over from Herod to Pilate and Pilate to Herod and all this mess. That's the Gentiles that's being referred to. Let's know that's Pilate. This is the Roman rule. When it says they're going to hand him over, that's Pilate. But then it says they will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him, and he will rise after 3 days. Jesus goes into a lot of detail to get them ready for what's to come. He's preparing them. How do we gain from preparation? Here's how. We are not overcome when it arrives. We are not overcome when it happens. Sometimes God will prepare you ahead of time for something you're going to face down the road. And when you feel that, and when you know that, when you're in the midst of it, then you can have the assurance that God has already gone before you and is going with you through that fire or through that time. It's kind of like, people used to tell me I was going to be a preacher. All right, I don't know what they were thinking. I really don't. People told me I was going to be a preacher, right? And I was like, no, you're not. No, I'm not. I had intended to be a 65-year-old youth pastor. Thought I was going to be the best one at 65. People started telling me that a long time ago. You're going to be a preacher, you're going to be a preacher, you're going to be a preacher. And I prayed against them over and over again. But what I noticed was over time, as that time began to come where God was beginning to align that, because I don't believe that things happen by chance. I believe that God aligns it and ordains it, and that it's His will, not ours, right? Because He knew my will wasn't to be a preacher. But I began to watch as God was preparing this and this and this and this. And I'm going, okay, I see where God's going. And then when those things began to come, I was better prepared for what it would be than had He not. God prepares us ahead of time so we're not overcome in the midst of it. Jesus was doing that for them there. Because notice what happened. Notice who He prepared. You're thinking the crowds, but it wasn't. Look back at your scripture and let's read it for what it says. Second half of verse number 32. Taking the 12 aside again, He began to tell them the things that would happen to Him. Who was He preparing? The closest ones. The closest one. Because here's why. It was going to affect them more than anybody else. That crowd would contain some of them who would turn just a week and a half later, 2 weeks later, a short time later. So what Jesus is doing, he's preparing those followers for what is to come. What is greatness according to Jesus? Huh? Yeah, being a servant. Yeah, and we've talked about this already. It's been in here. We've seen that theme woven through Mark, that being a servant is a sign of greatness. And what was wrong with the request of James and John?
They were talking about this, but they couldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, they were asking the wrong question, for sure. Huh? Yeah. And what another problem is, they approach Jesus with a worldly mindset. Think about it. See, here's the thing: is he was getting ready to go to the cross for them, and here they were worried about what place they'd have. And it happens with us. It does. It happens with us all the time. But here's the thing: their questioning was wrong simply because of the motive from which it came. Now, understand something: they were showing their humanity. I mean, that's us, ain't it?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. Well, and not only that, it's just preservation, self-preservation, yeah. And really, it's like, humility is the hardest thing in the world to truly attain. It really is. Humility is probably the hardest thing. That and patience. Those two things. Especially for me. Especially the patience part. I'm lacking. But humility is a hard thing for us. And Jesus isn't really excoriating them in his response. What he's doing, he's preparing them again for what's to come. He's helping them to understand being exalted in his eyes is not what it would look like in the world's eyes. World's eyes, it would be the throne, and to be on the right and the left hand, to be, hey, we're number one, thing one and thing two, right? Yeah, we want to be thing one and two. Let the other boys be 3 through 11, because we know Judas. But he was trying to help them to see, shift your eyes. It's not where you're seated at, it's that you're there. See it through God's eyes that it's not a position that makes you blessed. It is a passion for Jesus that will make you blessed. Okay? Your passion for Christ will always outweigh your position in life. If you have got a burning passion for Christ, that's when we do the stuff that servanthood stuff. How can we do a better job of serving? And I'm gonna let you answer that on your own, okay? But in our own lives, how can we do a better job of serving? Because here's the thing: is that we really need that now. We need it now more than ever before. So I'm gonna let you answer that one. You answer that on yourself, on your own terms. How can I do a better job of serving in my life? Because as Jesus points out, there is a very high, there's a huge importance put on serving. If you don't believe that, all you have to do is look at how he ends it with verse number 45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, to give his life a ransom for many. The importance of serving to Christ is hugely important. And he transitions it to what he would do for us. Therefore, what is our response to that? Our response should be, what can we do for you? And he's already given us those outlines throughout Scripture. What is it we can do for him? And he says, do it to the least of my brethren, you've done it unto me. You know, it's taking that position of the lowest, knowing that we're serving the highest. And you know, he's trying to help them with humility here. Why is servanthood necessary? Because Jesus served. The question, why is servanthood necessary? Because Jesus served. If it's funny. Yeah, we have to be. You can't separate the two. You know, you cannot separate the two.
Love thy neighbor as thyself.
Mm-hmm.
Is that probably one of the reasons that we believe in praying that we should fall down on our knees and show humility? God hears us whether we're standing or kneeling, but if we kneel, we're showing humility about anything.
It is a humble position before the Lord, yes, but we also do that for a wide variety of reasons. When Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was laid flat down, laid out, and it is a sign of reverence. It is a sign of an understanding of the holiness and the power of God, and we are mere mortals.
Like a submission.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, we can get into that because there's a whole lot that goes into our prayer positions and things like that. We bow our heads because of the Greeks. Most people don't know that. When we bow our heads, that's very Greekish. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is now. Yeah, but that's the position of the Greeks, because Hebrews will look to the sky, lift their hands. So the posture of the reverence of bowing the head is actually a Greek principle, but you know, most of the New Testament was written in Greek, and so there's an influence there that comes in. That would be something that we could discuss, but I could spend about 9 hours discussing that. But you are on the right track. How about that, Richard? There you go. You're on the right track. So, as we see the times changing, why is servanthood a topic that needs to be taught?
We need to be taught humility and care for our fellow man.
Not only that.
Because in these times, nobody wants to be a servant.
Right.
Yeah, there we're getting on it.
Gimme.
Yeah, gimme. And it is, but also, yeah, and you guys, Rebecca, you guys are on it. But there's one other thing that we need to add into it. Okay? There's one other thing that needs to be added into it. If we don't do it, it will disappear. You look. All right, I'm just going to throw these out there because I just don't care. I'm just honest. We took God out of schools, and look at the result. Okay? We.
I can think of the number one thing that schools teach in biology is survival of the fittest.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, and you know, the Darwinian thought process is reigns supreme. Okay, science was originally intended to be with God in the equation, but then God was removed and science went chaotic, and all these things. But you take God out of schools, you see what happened as a result, right? I mean, our schools are 100 times worse than what they were, you know, when God was in school. None of that. Look at, and this is another one. Probably, I don't know if it was my generation or the gap generation or what, but look at the difference between the manners that were taught 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe even early 80s to the manners that are taught now.
No.
I mean, there's really not.
And no,
I mean,
respect. There's
yeah.
no taught respect either.
You think when we were younger, you never went to Food Line, or if you did, you went to the wrong Food Line. But you never went to Food Line or Walmart or any of those places and heard the F-bomb just dropped on every aisle, right?
Or anybody cursing.
Okay, so what's happened is you stop teaching these principles and you stop instilling them in the home, right? Or in church or anywhere else. What happens is you have a devolving that happens and a decline that happens to where the moral decay, it speeds up. It's going to be there. The moral decay has to be there, and here's why I say that. Everybody's like, oh, you can't say that. Yeah, no, I can say that. Because Scripture says that in the last days, men will be lovers of self more than lovers of God, disobedient to parents, all these things. All right, the moral decay is going to happen. But it's on steroids when we stop teaching godly principles. So the principle of servanthood that has not been taught well in about 20 years and hasn't been modeled well in about 20 years, look at the outcome of it. Everybody is me, gimme, gimme, gimme. It's all about me.
Yes.
One of my favorite book titles. One of my favorite book titles is a Max Lucado book, and it says, "It's not about you." I thought, Max just hit the nail on the head with that one, right? But we live in a civilization and in a time that it is more, it's becoming more self-serving, which is less godly at its core. So the importance of teaching that servanthood is to keep godly principles at the forefront and keep them alive for the next generation. I mean, seriously, do you even... it is on the rare now you hear a kid say yes ma'am or yes sir. I mean, really. All right, if we didn't say it, yeah, that was a bad day. That was a bad day. And I made sure the next time I did say it because I didn't want my porch painted, right? There was a way to get your back porch painted red quick if you just said yeah or uh-huh. Oh, that one really got me in trouble. Yeah. A time or two, I charted out in the open waters of uh-huh. My father redirected me very quickly. Was not acceptable in response. So it's important because next generation and generations to come, if we're not modeling it, we're not teaching it, they're not going to have it. What did Jesus mean when he said that they, talking about James and John, would drink his cup? He was talking about martyrdom. Martyrdom. They would die for what they believed. We're going to clarify that in a minute. They would die for what they believed. Just as Jesus died, they would drink the same cup. The very cup that he said, if be thy will, let this cup pass from me. All right, was that prophecy correct? Notice I didn't say prediction. Was that prophecy correct? Yes, would be the correct answer. Yes. All right. We want to clarify this in a minute when you write yes down. All right, how do we know that? Acts 12:2. Acts 12:2. James would be the first of the disciples who was martyred. The first martyr of the disciples was James. You can find that in Acts 12:2. John died of natural causes. So immediately people say, well, he wasn't a martyr. Yes, he was. Because of the circumstances in which John died. John died in exile on the Isle of Patmos. That's where he got revelation from. He died not long after that. And how can we call that a martyr? Because it was a persecution for his faith that sent him to that isle in exile. Yeah. And he died there basically imprisoned for his faith, which would make him still a martyr. Yeah. So they drank the cup of dying in circumstances because of their faith. Okay? We have to clarify that because most people, when they think martyrdom, they only think of hanging, of some kind of execution. But John's would still be a martyrdom because they wanted him to shut up about Jesus, and he wouldn't do it. So they're like, we're going to put you on an island with nobody else, so that way you can run your mouth all you want to and nobody can hear you. How'd that work out for them? We still got revelation. Good try, boys. You know, but the thing was that it would be a form of martyrdom. What did Bartimaeus see, even though he was blind? He saw through the eyes of faith. Saw through the eyes of faith. As we read in Scripture tonight, it says that when he heard it was Jesus, he began to cry out. See, here's the thing. He couldn't see Jesus, could he? No, he couldn't see Jesus. He was blind. But he knew what he had heard about Jesus. And through the eyes of faith, he called out to the one who could change his life. And it's an incredible story, to be honest with you. If you read Blind Bartimaeus, it's a really incredible story. What was the crowd's reaction? Shut up. Yeah. Would you please shut up? Would you please stop talking? And you know, I'm sure those who told him to do so had their reasons for doing it. Somebody's calling me right now. I'm going to have to cut that off right now. Ooh, okay. I meant to silence that, folks, so my apologies. But they had their reasons, I'm sure. They said, hush, shut up, you know, please stop. What did Bartimaeus do in response?
He just yelled louder.
He just got louder. They were like, shut up. And he was like, Jesus, over here. You know, he wasn't. The one chance he had was passing by him that day, and he didn't care what anybody else thought. He was going to make sure Jesus heard him. I love the way it says that. It says many people in verse 48. Many people told him to keep quiet, but he was crying out all the more. He was like, go ahead, tell me to shut up. I ain't gonna do it. So he got louder. What is a teachable aspect of Bartimaeus' response to the ones who tried to stop him? Persistence. Don't let anybody stop you. Yeah. All right? Don't let them stop you. If you know, and you should know by now, that Jesus has got everything you need, nobody is to stop you from getting to Jesus. Nobody. Let them call you crazy. One of my favorite songs in the world is this old Mercy Me song. They had just barely gotten known at that point. But there was this song called Crazy. And in the chorus of it, he says, I have not been called to the wisdom of this world, but to a God who's calling out to me. And even though the world may think I'm losing touch with reality, it would be crazy to choose this world over eternity. Amen. And that it captures Bartimaeus in that moment. He was like, you know, they're saying, shut up, man, you're embarrassing yourself. And he's like, I don't care. That guy's got what I need. He's screaming with all his might. I'm going to be honest with you, I love some Bartimaeus. Why? Because when everybody said shut up, he just got louder. Because he was not going to let that stop him from being heard by the one he needed to be heard by. What did Jesus do when he heard Bartimaeus? Yeah, he called him, but there's a word in front of that we need. Stopped.
Jesus stopped.
Stopped. He stopped. And there's an important point in that, okay? He stopped. He did call out to him as well, but you can put call out to him, but make sure you put the word stop. We're talking about Jesus again, folks. What did Jesus do when he heard Bartimaeus? He stopped. Jesus healed a centurion servant from miles away. He had the ability to call Lazarus out of the grave, right? Lazarus, you come out. You didn't have to go in to get him. He called him to come on out, right? Jesus could have kept on walking, snapped his fingers, man could have seen. Right. Jesus could have kept on walking, left Bartimaeus there. He was Jesus. He'd done whatever he wanted to do. But he stopped. He gave Bartimaeus a sign of his importance by stopping. By stopping. It's so hard for us sometimes in life. We're running, especially me. I'm running. Running. And so a lot of times somebody's talking to him, all right, walk with me because I got to get to the car because I got to be somewhere in 15 minutes. And this week when I kept reading over this passage, stop. Somebody needs you. Stop. That's exactly what Jesus did. He stopped. He didn't have to. Bartimaeus could have been healed 9,000 ways to Sunday. Mark makes a point of pointing out he stopped. He didn't keep on walking. He stopped. Why is that important?
We need to stop and show our concern.
It does. We need to stop. Sometimes we just got to stop. Jerusalem was still going to be there. The cross was still going to be there. Stop. It showed that man some importance. It gave him some value. That out of all the things that Jesus had going on, he stopped for one. For one. And here's what I want you to see, guys. That's what the Lord does for you when you call out to him. He stops for you, the one. That's why it's so important to, when we read that, to understand, like, the story of the lost sheep, that he'll leave the 99 to go get the one. You're the one. When you look in the mirror each morning, you were one. That he left the 99 just to make sure he got you. And when you realize that, you stop weighing yourself so much in the eyes of the world as far as your value, what other people think and what other people say and all that. And you realize Jesus thinks I'm pretty important. Exactly. He was going to a cross to die for me. And how much more importance could you have than that? Than the Son of God who walked this earth, took nails and a beating and died for you. Doesn't matter. And you know what he didn't do? He didn't ask the world what they thought about you before he did it. Ain't that the coolest part of it? He didn't ask the world if I was worthy of it, because I know what the world would have said. Absolutely not. Yeah.
He knew how worthy and unworthy you are.
Exactly. But he said, I was worth it.
Yes.
And that's what he says to you. You're worth it. He stopped Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus is calling out and screaming his head off. And I imagine this guy's probably got his arms flailing. Lord Jesus, come on. I'm over here. It'd be like Gilligan's Island. Hey, we're over here. They never got off that island. They canceled that show before they got off. I read that the other day. I never realized that, but they canceled that show before they ever got off that island. So Gilligan's still out there somewhere. Who knows? But here's the thing. He was doing everything he could to get Jesus' attention. Not only did he get Jesus' attention, stop Jesus where he was at. So. All right, what made Bartimaeus well according to Jesus?
Faith.
Thank you. Good word, folks. Faith. That's what faith can do for me and you. Whether we're happy or blue. And what is the intersection that takes place in this healing? Faith and the power of God. This is what happens when faith meets the power of God. A life is changed forever. Notice this wasn't a temporary healing. He didn't give him his vision back for an hour, did he? That's why when we learn about salvation, it's an eternal thing, because it is an act of faith to submit and surrender to God. It is an act of grace, but it's also the power of God intersecting with faith. And guess what it does? It eternally changes a life. Eternally changes. Because before that moment, our soul is bound to where? Hell. In that moment of salvation, when God reaches down and saves us, it is an eternal touch of God that changes life forever and ever. So, all right, what does Bartimaeus do after the healing, folks?
Follow Jesus.
Oh, yes, he did. You better believe he did. Yeah, he followed. And here's something to be noted about that. Jesus didn't even ask him to. Look at the last verse that we read tonight. Go your way. Go your way. Jesus told him, your faith has healed you. Immediately he could see and began to follow him on the road. His way now was the way of Jesus. See? Before it would have been anywhere else, other directions. Jesus said, go your way. Your faith has made you well. And he said, my way is your way. See? What do we learn from his response? When Jesus touches us, we follow. We follow. We don't just come to Christ for what we need. That is the most dangerous thing that's happening in Christianity right now. I will run to Jesus and pray when I need something. I will leave him behind the rest of my days. That is danger zone, church. That is danger zone. You can't do that. Bartimaeus, when he was touched by Jesus, when he was healed by Christ, and Jesus told him, go on your way, his way was now the way of the cross, the way of Christ. And he would follow him. That was an amazing thing to see how not only was his sight given to him, but his entire life was redirected from that very moment. I don't know about you guys, but if I had been blind my whole life and finally got sight, I would be running around looking at everything and everybody. And everybody I'd ever talked to, I want to go see what they look like, you know? Because you know he knew voices. Because that's what he would recognize them by. And man, I'd be running to see who that guy was and that mean woman. I'm going to go find her, you know, or that mean guy, I'm going to go find him. I want to see what he looks like, you know. Or that guy who gave me a burger that day. Man, I'm going to find him, thank him for it. I want to see what he looks like. He looks like a nice guy. Bartimaeus, given that precious gift of sight, then said, my way is now your way. I'm going with you.
It's yet another demonstration of his deep faith.
It is because he could not waver away from the one who had changed everything, who had transitioned it all. And when you look at that, I mean, that's powerful, folks. That right there preaches. You know that.
Don't you think this feel-good preaching just gives them a little bit of head knowledge? It's a lot of difference.
I will let me sign off, and we can discuss that for a minute because we're a little bit early. The feel-good preaching is actually, if you want me to be honest with you, it is from Satan. It is from Satan because what it does, it props people up to believe in an eternity they don't have. And I once heard one of them say they didn't believe in preaching in sin because sin makes people feel bad. I can't make that up. That was on Larry King. One of the mega church pastors said, I don't preach on sin because sin makes people feel bad. I'd rather have my toes obliterated and walk in heaven than to feel good and be condemned to hell. You know, I do believe that the feel-good preaching is a tactic of Satan because if I can make them feel like they're okay and they're not,
They're in their mind thinking they're good. They thinking I can do this and I'll be all right.
In a lost mind, yes. In a lost mind. If you have come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, And if there is a true conversion in a person, you know you can't sit under that and believe it. You know what I'm saying?
I know that.